Welcome to session 2 of Learning from the Land. We are coming to you from all over the province of New Brunswick and 3 ancestral territories, the Mi'kmaq, the Passamaquoddy, and the Wolastoqey. And we're being hosted in Wolastoqey territory by Southern Victoria High School. Thank you so much for your bell schedule, Southern Victoria, because we are following it to a T. I would like to just quickly remind you that being on mute would be appreciated. If you can mute your mics during Sheldon's presentation, that would be great. And I'm going to take 2 seconds to just give you something to take a picture of. If something goes awry, like our Zoom boots us out, maybe somebody in the class can take a photo of this meeting ID, and it's only backup if something happens. Okay, you can enter this meeting room. So I am going to turn the mic over to Miss Becky Gino from Science East, who will have the honors of introducing our next speaker. And we'll take it from there. Becky, you are being recorded at my end, and I'll keep my eye on participants for you and for Sheldon.
Thank you very much, Pamela. Good morning, everybody. And I am going to just take 2 seconds here to introduce myself as well. I am Becky Gino. I am the Envirothon New Brunswick coordinator for our province. And that is an environmental science competition for high school students, if you have not heard about it. I know there's quite a few people on here that are participating in our first virtual competition that we've ever hosted, which is happening the first week of May. We are welcoming those from Prince Edward Island that are also here today. They are joining our competition as well. And Sheldon is one presenter of a weekly series that we're offering virtual workshops that have to do with different themes along the topics of Envirothon that include forestry, wildlife, aquatics, and soils. And so without any further ado, I would like to introduce Sheldon Han, who is from Agriculture and Agri-Foods Canada. He has been our soils test writer and leader of that topic for many, many years. And we are really pleased to have him join us here today. Thank you, Sheldon.
Thanks, Becky. Thanks, Pam. Everybody hear me? Yeah?
We can hear you, and somebody needs to mute. Maybe it's me. Perfect.
That's great. Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks again, guys, for allowing me to come and have a conversation about soils and land use with respect to Envirothon. And it's always great to spread the word about soil. So I'll share my screen here, Pam, if that's okay. All right, so everybody can see my screen. Just waiting for a nod from somebody.
You're great, Sheldon. It looks beautiful.
All right, great. Yeah, so today I'm like Becky and Pam said, my name is Sheldon Han. I'm with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. I'm a biologist with them. And I've been there for almost 20 years. I've worked with many different types of crops and from water quality to groundwater quality to cropping rotations to soil surveying, everything. So it's really kind of nice to get a well-rounded career out of in touching many different aspects of soils and land use. So today I'm going to give a presentation about soils and land use, dealing with looking at soil properties and characteristics for the virtual workshop. So just to go over a little outline of what we're going to do today, or what I'm going to cover is soil classification, soil associations, Catenas and series. The phone is telling me I'm late. Soil landscape characteristics. We'll look at what soil quality is and how to determine what soil quality is. look at soil physical properties, soil chemical properties, biological properties as well. Soil drainage, we'll look at a little exercise to understand how soil properties and characteristics are used to determine soil suitability for land uses. We'll also do a Kahoot exercise. But before I go jump into this presentation, I just want to do a little one slide refresher of the last presentation I did, just in case some people weren't able to attend. So what is soil? Soil is the top layer of the Earth's surface that is composed of minerals, organic matter, living organisms, water, and air. And all of these components work together to support life, and they're continuously changing. With any additions that get added, the crops that are grown, the organisms that are present, those things constantly change over time. So the soil is dynamic. It's constantly changing. I also covered what the functions of soil are. So they include, it's a medium for plant growth, it recycles nutrients and organic waste, it modifies the atmosphere, provides habitat for organisms, engineering medium, it's a system for water supply and purification. I also described how the soil formation equation, the Clorps model, it's called by Yenny. It says that soil describes the soil as a function of the climate or precipitation and temperature of a given area. It's a function of the organisms that are present there, whether that's vegetation, microbes, soil organisms, or humans, as well as the relief or topography. So the elevation or the slope aspect, landscape position affects the soil that is found, what the parent material consists of, whether it's rocks and minerals or organic material, as well as time, so that the time that the parent material has been under soil formation will produce, it has an effect on the soil that's produced as well. I also covered what some soils look like. So some agricultural soils, for example, they have a specific, they can have a range of, or a range of soil horizons that you can find from A to B to C horizons. Just an example here in the picture, as well as forest soils, what you can find here for forest soils as well, with the litter layer, the A horizons, the B horizons, the C horizons again, just as some examples. So we'll start off this seminar by talking about soil classification. I covered it in the last one as well, but I think it's really important to hit it again, just to clarify, or just to help people feel comfortable about the soil classification system. So the Canadian soil classification system, it's based on soil properties that are observable and measurable, and it's conceptual. The classes are conceptual. They're based on generalization of properties of real soil that are found. So there's examples of these soils across the country. It's based mainly on the kinds, the degree of development, and the sequence of the soil horizons and the layers that are found. So it has a specific sequence or range of sequences that can be found for each of the soil classes or soil orders that are found there. And just to give a definition of what a soil horizon is, a soil horizon is a layer of mineral or organic soil material approximately parallel to the land surface and has characteristics altered by the process of soil formation. So that Yenny Clorps model, it differs from the adjacent horizons in things like color or texture or structure. We'll go over some of these soil properties later on, consistence, and in chemical, biological, and mineralogical composition. So the key is that there's different sequences of soil horizons, and those give rise to the classification system. So here's a map of the soil orders of Canada. So you can kind of get an idea of how they're located across the country. For New Brunswick, we have a high percentage of our soils are podzolic soils. We have luvisols and brunosols in there as well, and organic soils as well. You can kind of get an idea of what you can find across the country. And I also put the link, to the Canadian System Soil Classification if anybody wanted to go and check it out and see what it looks like. So the soil classification system includes order, grade group, and subgroup. as classification. The soil orders include brunasolic, chernozemic, cryosolic, glycolic, lubosolic, organic, podzolic, ragosolic, stolonetzik, and vertisolic. So again, there are specific sequences of layers or horizons that you can see within those soil pits or that give rise to that classification.
How do I unmute my speakers?
So you can see here on the right-hand side, there are some examples of a podzolic soil found in Quebec, as well as a lubosol or lubosolic soil found in Alberta. So the classification system is built on a key where you step through the key individually, and based on the descriptions of each of the points within the key, you then move down through the key to determine which soil order, as well as the subgroup and grade group for your given soil pit. I won't go through it, but you can kind of get an idea of how it works. And then, like I was saying before, the classification system, you have patterns of horizons within a given order that help determine which subgroup or grade group that your soil is found in. So for example, the ragosolic order, it's characterized by an organic horizon with an A horizon on top, followed by a C horizon. So it lacks a B horizon, and that's a ragosolic order. And depending on if there's a buried horizon or there's no buried horizon, then you would get your subgroup and your grade group from there. So this is an orthic ragosol. You can see an A horizon over the C horizon, which is this very first orthic ragosol. Again, with the podzolic soils that you can find here in New Brunswick, very specific order of horizons as you move down the soil profile. You get an LFH horizon on top, so your organic horizon, an AH horizon. Your AE horizon is the white horizon you're finding. Underneath that white horizon is a BF horizon, the red horizon you can see here. And there's a transition period from this BF horizon down to the C horizon, which is at the bottom of the screen, the bottom of the picture. So, and when you look at that pattern
No, we
of
can't hear
soil,
'em.
can you hear me? Is there a
Sheldon,
problem with?
no, we can hear you, Sheldon. It just might be on their end.
Okay. You want me to wait a second?
Continue.
Okay. Yeah, so this pattern of horizons that you can see within this bottom picture of the podzol, it then gets classified as a orthic humiferric podzol. So it's just, understanding that there are these different soil classes, different soil orders, and then the occurrence of the horizons determine the classification of that soil. So then, switching gears from the classification system, we're going to talk a little bit about soil associations, soil catenas, and soil series. So what is a soil association? It's a non-taxonomic, so it's not a classified, it's not a classification system of, it's a grouping of soils that occur together in the landscape. It combines related soils into units having similarity in whether it's geomorphic position, the landform that's found there, the soil conditions and mechanical properties such as climate or drainage or particle size. So here's an example of a soil association in New Brunswick, up around the Tobique area. You can see that this soil association is consisted of a juniper soil, glassfill soil, ammoniac and interval, undine, caribou, homesoil. So these are all soil catenas that are found within the soil association. And each of these catenas have a different parent material. You can see on the bottom, the bedrock, granites, shales, calcareous shales, and quartzites. So these are soil catenas that are found here. Like for example, the homesoil is a soil catena. So the soils that are found within the catena, the soils that are found within the homesoil catena could differ in elevation or could differ in drainage, but they don't but they all occur in the same parent material. So a soil association is a grouping of different soils that are found in a given landscape, and a soil catena is the individual components of that soil association. So like I said, the soil catena is a group or sequence of soils that are derived from similar parent materials and occur in similar climatic conditions, but have unlike characteristics because of variations in relief or drainage. So if we go back and look at the Holmesville series again, so if a soil is found at the top of the hill or at the bottom of the hill, if it has well drainage or poor drainage, it's still called a Holmesville catena because it's classified or it's grouped based on a
I do,
catena.
but they're not paired.
And then when we look at the individual soils within a catena, that is when we find the soil series. So soil series are found within each individual soil series are found within a catena. They have different drainages. So if we work through these this example at the bottom here, so soils that are developed on compact moraine till, compact ground moraine, and have a yellowish brown parent material, so they all have the same brown parent material, they would all be called Holmesville. It's when we look at the drainage classes is when we start to separate it out into this different soil series. So the soil catena for this yellowish brown parent material is going to be Holmesville catena. And then if it's a well-drained soil, it's going to be a Holmesville soil series. If it's imperfectly drained or poorly drained, it's going to be a Johnville soil series. And a poorly or very poorly drained is going to be a Quatra soil series. It can be a little confusing, but you know, it takes a few times to kind of wrap your head around how the association, catena, and series work together. So then let's talk a little bit about landscape characteristics. These are things that we can actually measure in the field that help us understand what soils are found and give us indications of the soil properties that we can find within each given soil. So landscape characteristics include a variety of surface measurements and classifications. These characteristics are instrumental in soil formation and provide valuable insights to soils present. So if we look at things like the landscape characteristics of elevation, you can actually go out and measure the elevation of a given soil, your soil pit. Soils that are found in higher elevations tend to have less water present than those in low-lying areas. We can look at slope and slope position. So soils with steep slopes tend to have shallow, poorly developed profiles because of the steepness in comparison with those with more level sites. We can look also at aspect, and we can calculate aspect, where north-facing slopes tend to be cooler and wetter than south-facing slopes. So these are all characteristics that we can actually go to the field and measure that will give us indications of the soil blind. Here are some examples of some surface expressions and slope characteristics or landscape characteristics. So here you can see that, you know, a given landscape can have a veneer surface expression. It could be blanket surface expression. You know, undulating and rolling is a lot of what we find in the potato belt. Slope can actually be a simple slope, or it can be a very complex slope where you have many different drainage classes that are found in the complex slope. Sorry. Also, the site position on the slope. So the slope position, whether you're at the top of the hill or you're at the bottom of the hill, will help determine soil properties as well. And just here's an example of a image in New Brunswick where you have, you know, we have one side of the hill has more, one side of the mountain has more softwood species that are present. Very steep slopes have very little soil, very little vegetation. Those are all indications of what you can find underneath. So the tree species here is an indication of the aspect or which direction that slope is facing. Cooler, wetter climates. You know, using what we're seeing on the land surface gives us indications of what we can see underneath. And as well, here's some classification system for when we're describing soils in the field. These are the different slope classes, just to give you an idea of how detailed the information we're capturing is. So now we'll switch and look at some soil quality. And what is soil quality exactly? Soil quality is the capacity of a soil to function within an ecosystem, to sustain biological productivity, maintain environmental quality, and promote plant and animal health. So at the end of the day, it's kind of looking at how does a soil perform to provide all the functions that we talked about before, providing habitat, nutrient cycling, regulating water, engineering medium, providing fuel and fiber and food, sequestering carbon. To how does the soil perform is a great definition of soil quality. So then how can we measure soil quality? So soil quality is measured using soil properties and indicators of those soil properties. So if we look at the diagram that was done by Wilson up here in the corner, you can see that there are three broad classes of indicators. There's chemical indicators, there's chemical properties, there's physical properties, and biological properties that we use to measure soil quality. So for example, the chemical properties are used, we're going to look at understanding how the soil supplies the plant nutrients and stores nutrients. And we can actually use soil measurements or soil properties, like what are the soil nutrients that are found, what is the soil pH, what is the plant nutrient uptake, how much of the nutrients that the plant is actually taking up or are available to the plants. Physical properties, we're looking at how permeable and how rootable the soil is, and how is the soil at providing a storage of plant available water. So here we can look at soil properties like infiltration. We can measure the infiltration, look at bulk density, texture class, aggregate stability, how much water is present in the soil at field capacity and wilting point. We can look at the biological properties. These are things like soil organic matter, the food for the organisms, as well as how much biological activity is actually happening and the species that are found there. So then we can measure, the collembola or springtails that are found in there. We can look at how much microbial biomass is happening. What is the total carbon and nitrogen that's available in the soil as well. So I'll step through each one of these soil properties with some examples of the soil properties that we will measure or we can measure to determine soil quality and how the soil is performing. So soil physical properties, the physical properties influence the permeability and rootability of the soils, the storage of plant available water. So evaluating physical properties provide insight into the suitability of a soil for an intended land use. So examples of physical properties that are evaluated include things like soil texture and soil structure, soil bulk density, aggregate stability, infiltration, soil water content, soil color, like I described in the previous slide. So if we look at soil texture as an example, it refers to the proportions of sand, silt, and clay that are found in a given soil. It influences the water, how much water the soil can hold, the rate of movement through the soil, how fast the water and air can move through the soil, as well as soil fertility. You can see here the different size particles, the relative size of the particles from sand, silt, and clay, and then different proportions. So sand, silt, and clay, they usually occur together in different percentages within the soil. So the soil has different combinations of sand, silt, and clay, and the different percentages give rise to texture classes within a given soil. So these texture classes include sand to loam to clay and everything in between, where sand is the coarse texture soils and clay is the fine texture soils. And here is, you can see the texture triangle is here as well. So here's where you would calculate how much sand, silt, and clay your soil has using various techniques to determine texture class. And then you would be able to understand what is your actual texture class based on the percent of sand, percent silt, and percent clay. And that would give you an indication of how dense your soil is, how much water and air can move through that soil, how easy it is for the plant roots to penetrate into the soil. You can also do a field test or a field texture test where you take a soil sample, you would run through a texture key, and at the end it would tell you how gritty or how smooth and how long of a ribbon your soil produces. That would give you an indication of the texture class of your soil. Then you can use that to further describe your soils. When we think about water movement and air movement through the soil, if you look at the lower right hand side of the slide, you can see that the sand, the texture class of sand is very porous, very open structure within the soil, and it has a fast infiltration rate, so water can move quickly through the soil, which means that not a lot of water is running off the surface in erosion. It's penetrating down through the soil. And as you move to a more clay or more fine texture class, it's very compact, it's very dense, high bulk density, slow infiltration rate. So this is where you get more water running off the surface of the soil instead of percolating down through the soil. So next I'll talk about the next physical property. I'll talk about the soil structure. It describes the spatial arrangement of soil aggregates, or PEDs they're called. And they're influenced by the texture, how much organic matter is present, the activity of organisms, and land use. So in structure there are 6 different classes of structure. You can have single grain, which would be like beach sand, that has a very fast infiltration rate, very high sand percentage for texture, low organic matter, down to a plate-like or massive structure where you have more clays present, more fine texture soils, but very little water moving through. So very slow infiltration rate. And understanding that these kind of relationships between soil structure and soil texture and water movement and bulk density. So you would expect that these single grain or granular structures have high percentage of sands, move water and air through the soil quickly, but are very have a low bulk density, whereas the plate-like and massive structures have more fine sediments, air and water move slowly through them, and they have a very high bulk density. So if it's a plant root, it's going to have a harder time getting through the plate-like structure or the massive structure than the single grain or granular structure. And here's an example of our classification system when we're describing soils, how the granular structure has multiple size classes. Same with the angular and subangular blocky structures. They have multiple size classes. So there's a lot of classes within our classification system for soil structure when we're describing soils in the field. The next property, physical property I talked about, is soil color. Soil color provides valuable clues to the nature of soil conditions and fertility. So it is produced, the color is produced by the minerals that are present, the organic matter content, and then soil drainage. So here's an example on the right-hand side of the potato field in PEI. You can see the red color of the soil. That's an indication of the iron that's found within the soil. You can see on the picture on the left-hand side, the handful of soil that is black in color that has high organic matter. That soil color indicates high organic matter with that black color, whereas the handful of soil on the right side is more brown. It has low organic matter. And then if we look at soil drainage, you'll see that a little later. There are the brighter the colors for a soil pit indicates rapid or well or moderately well drained soils versus poorly drained soils have kind of a dull color. And we use the Munsell color charts in terms of hue value and chroma to describe soil color. That's, you don't really need to know that right now, but it's just a good tidbit of information. Soil properties, we'll change now to soil chemical properties. So soil chemical properties influence the supply of plant nutrients and the storage of nutrients. So evaluating the chemical properties of the soil provide insight in the ability of a soil to provide and promote plant and animal health. Examples of chemical properties that are evaluated include soil nutrients, so things like nitrogen and phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, boron, so forth and so on. Soil pH, I'll talk about why soil pH is so important. The soil cation exchange capacity, as well as plant uptake. So if we look at soil nutrients, and soil nitrogen is the first chemical property we can look at, is that the management of nitrogen is widely researched and studied for soils. Deficiencies or excess have major impacts on the health and productivity of the world's ecosystems. Nitrogen stimulates the above and below ground growth and development, as well as stimulates the uptake of other nutrients as well. So here's an example of with and without the use of nitrogen. So here on the right hand side, you can see that there is plants that have been provided with nitrogen exhibit stimulates growth, above and below ground growth, whereas no nitrogen, they're stunted plants, weak and stunted plants. The main water quality problem attributed to nitrogen is the leaching of nitrate into the groundwater. So nitrate can reach and contaminate drinking water and may eventually flow underground to surface waters, affecting water quality in aquatic ecosystems. So in order to mitigate this or try to minimize this, we need to first understand how, what exactly, before we plant any crops, we need to understand what is the residual soil. So how much nitrogen is remaining in the soil right now before we plant anything. So we go and measure the residual soil nitrogen in the field, in the soil. We then determine what is the requirement of the crop. So how much nitrogen does the crop actually need, as well as the time of application. So does it need it all at planting, or does it need it later in the growing season when there's another burst of growth within the crop? And then we need to measure that uptake of the crop and how much nitrogen has been taken up by the crop, so that we minimize the under or over fertilization. So, working through this process, we can then minimize the excess or deficiencies of nitrogen to the system, to the ecosystem. The next soil chemicals I'll talk about are phosphorus and potassium. So phosphorus and potassium are essential for plants and animals. Phosphorus enhances the fundamental process of photosynthesis, flowering, fruiting, maturation, and root development. Potassium is essential for photosynthesis, protein synthesis, and starch formation, all extremely important to plant species. So here's just some examples of deficiencies in corn, for example, on the side here. So when you see a purpling of the leaves on the corn plant, you know that there's a phosphorus deficiency. Potash, you get a yellowing and a redding of the outer areas of the leaves. That indicates a potassium deficiency in the plant. So being able to recognize these can really help understand what is available in the plant, what is available to the plant and what's available in the soil. But again, back to this kind of mechanism where we're looking at, before we plant the crop and add fertilizer or add compost or add any of these additions, we need to first understand what is currently in the soil. So measure the residual phosphorus and potassium in the soil, determine how much phosphorus and potassium or nutrients the crop needs, and then be able to apply those so that the plant can use them, so we can minimize the under and over fertilization of those nutrients. So the next chemical property I'll talk about is soil pH. So soil pH is the degree of acidity or alkalinity, and it affects a wide range of soil chemical and biological processes. It influences which nutrients and elements are available to the plants. It influences the communities of soil microorganisms and their activities. It also influences the plant species that occur in a given area. So some species like acidic soils, some species like basic soils. So here you can see for a mineral soil, this is the nutrient availability across the pH scale for soils from 4.5 to 8. You can see that the more acidic soils tend to have magnesium and iron more available to the plants, whereas calcium tends to be lower. And as you move up towards the more neutral acidity, more of these plant nutrients are available to the plant. As well as here's organic soils as well, just to give you an idea, mineral versus organic soils. So then if we look at some pH ranges for common crops in New Brunswick, here you can see the optimum pH ranges, pH values for fruits and cereals and forages, vegetables, kind of gives you a range of values, and that can help then before you plant a crop, you would get a soil sample, determine the residual chemical soil nutrients that are found before you recommend what fertilizers should go in, as well as understand where the pH of your soil is and then how that can be adjusted or should be adjusted in order to reach that optimum level for whatever your crop you're going to grow. So if we look at the soil biological properties, so biological properties are driven by organic matter and the activity of soil organisms to decompose and convert organic matter into forms that are available to other organisms. So evaluating the biological properties provide insight in decomposition rates, soil organism biodiversity, disease and pest pressure, and various soil physical and chemical properties. So some examples of biological properties that we can measure in the field is soil organic matter, soil biological activity, and soil organism biodiversity. So for soil organic matter provides the food source for soil organisms. It increases cation exchange capacity within the soil. Higher soil organic matter provides water holding capacity, increased water holding capacity. It enhances the water infiltration and aeration of the soil. It opens the soil structure. It's responsible for the formation and stabilization of soil aggregates. So these aggregates that are formed, it actually increases that the stabilization of those aggregates or aggregate stability. That's why we measure aggregate stability. Organic matter contains large quantities of plant nutrients, and they can act as a slow release nutrient storehouse for the plants and the organisms that live within the soil. Here's just two pictures. One is a soil that has high organic matter, is the black picture there, and the other picture, the brown soil that has very low organic matter, just to give you an idea of how soil color can be used to identify soil organic matter as well. So then if we look at soil biological activity and biodiversity, soil is home to billions of organisms, not organisms, from macroorganisms like worms and insects to microorganisms like bacteria and fungi. Species that are found in forest soils can vary greatly from those found in agricultural or organic soils. And so the species that are grown there, or the crops that are grown, or the plant species that are found there influence the microorganisms and the organisms that are found within a given soil. So soil organism numbers are influenced by the amount of food that's available, things like moisture and temperature, competition and predators that are found, as well as pH and nutrients that are found. And then communities of plants and animals above the ground influence the communities of microorganisms and organisms that are found below the ground. And understanding that relationship is really key. Here's a great example of a monoculture system versus a diverse cropping system. So the monoculture system has one type of crop grown in a large area. Because it's only one crop, you have there's a high chance of soil-borne disease because there's only one crop. planted in that area. There's high soil erosion because the soil is only covered at one vertical scale. You have low nutrient use efficiency and low water use efficiency. So what that's saying is that the plant is only using nutrients and water for specific times during its growing period, during the growing season. The diversity is low because it's only one crop. And then when we look at the soil functional microorganisms, or what's found in the soil, with one crop, you get a specific group of microorganisms that are working within the soil for that crop, as well as, you know, the crop that's grown could have an insect pest that is only has one bird predator, so you're decreasing the diversity of the organisms that you're going to find within that monoculture system. When we compare that to a diverse cropping system where we have multiple species grown in the same area, we have decreased soil-borne disease because the competition between the different plant species and microorganism species. There's decreased soil erosion because these crops will have different emergence times. They would and different growth patterns and growth periods. The nutrient use efficiency and water use efficiency has gone up. And this is due to that difference in growth periods. So that the corn may grow at a different rate than the flowers or the barley. And so then water is used at different periods during the growing season, and nutrients are used at different periods in the growing season. The biodiversity has increased because now you have multiple crops with multiple pests and multiple predators. As well as the microorganisms. You have multiple microorganisms communities working together to provide the functions that are needed for each of these individual crops. So now I'll switch gears to look at soil drainage. So soil drainage is defined by the length of time it takes water to be removed from the soil in relation to the supply. Soil drainage is affected by two groups of factors. The first is soil external factors, things that we talked about before, the landscape characteristics like position of the slope aspect, bedrock, the presence of what type of bedrock is found there, as well as the climate, temperature, and precipitation. So soils that are found in the upper portions of the slope will have usually improved drainage versus those at the lower portions of the slope. Then we can look at these soil internal factors. So things like texture and stoniness and coarse fragments and structure and bulk density affect the soil internal factors. So whether it's a coarse textured sandy soil versus a fine textured clay soil, so that's, you know, very low bulk density, very high bulk density, a lot of water passing through, very little water passing through. Those all affect the drainage of a given soil. So there are 6 drainage classes: rapidly, well, moderately well, imperfectly, poor, and very poor. Soils with rapid to moderately well drained drainage tend to have bright colors, and soils with imperfect to very poor drainage tend to have gray colors or tend to look more washed out. So here is an example of our agricultural soil. And you can see these, you know, the colors are very bright across the down through the soil pit. You can see these horizons are very bright. So this would be more in the rapid well, moderately well drained soil drainage classification. Here are some examples of some other soils that are found in New Brunswick. These are just pictures taken from the field. So here you can see again, there are these bright colors that show up, the whites and the AE horizon in the white, the BF horizon in the red. You can see the very bright colors. That would be a moderately well-drained soil. Here you can see this AH horizon over the C horizon. Very washed out, all kind of looks the same color. That's would be a poor soil drainage or poorly drained. And if you think back to the soil orders in like the first or second or third slide, an AH horizon over a C horizon is called a regisol. So this would be a regisol. And then if we look at the next picture, see how there's water forming in the bottom of the soil pit here. So there's a compact layer down here somewhere where the texture is really fine. So then this would be imperfect to poorly drained, as well as the following, the last picture on the right-hand side, You get some soil colors up here, some AE horizon showing up here, but then you get this compact C horizon, B and C horizon. So you get the water coming into the soil pit. So that would be an imperfect pore as well. So now we'll move on to the next portion that talks about using soil properties to determine soil suitability. So I kind of approached this as a kind of a little case study where we're asked to determine the suitability of a given location, which is what you can see here, for the production of potatoes. So now how do we provide a suitability map or interpretation for potato production for this given area? So we have to create a workflow, and this workflow is saying that we first need to identify the crop requirements in terms of soil and landscape properties. So what does the crop need in terms of soil, physical, chemical, biological properties, as well as landscape characteristics in order to grow properly or grow well? Then we need to identify what soils are currently present there and what soil properties are found for those soils for that study area. And then we need to interpret the results. So take those crop requirements, take those soil properties, and be able to convert them over to a suitability for that area. So if we look at the crop requirements for potatoes, we can see that the major soil properties influencing the use, are drainage, texture, bulk density or thickness to a certain bulk density. This 1.65 is a bulk density where plant roots cannot penetrate. The slope class is an important property. Rockiness, stoniness, and then if there's flooding, this occurs. So here we can see that, in order to get a good rating for potatoes, you have to have well and moderately well-drained soils with loam, silt loam, or sandy loam texture. The bulk density, it has to have 40 centimeters of soil that has a bulk density less than 1.65, so not very dense soil. The slope class, it can only be to 5% slope before it gets downgraded to a lower suitability class. And then no flooding, very little stones, and no rocks. So then if we know the suitability, the crop requirements for potatoes, now we can then see what our study area has in terms of soil. So if we look at the soils map for that given area, we can see that there's a caribou soil series, there's a Saigas, there's Muniak, McGee, Glassville, Undine, Holmesville, which is the provincial soil for New Brunswick, Grand Falls, so forth and so on. So now we know, okay, these are the soils that are present in our given location. What about the drainage? How does the drainage look? So then we add the drainage layer to that, and we can see that, there are these drainage areas that come up that would have a lower drainage. The larger areas, I'm not sure if you guys can see my mouse or not, but the larger areas here would have maybe a moderately well drained, whereas these small stream areas where there's water accumulating would have probably a poor drainage. So this is really important when we're looking at how much drainage affects whether it's suitable for potatoes or not. So then we would then go, skip through a bunch here. Then we would go back to our soil. Then we would go to our soils database that says, okay, so there's caribou soil there. Let's look caribou soil series. It's a mineral soil, and with the soil drainage of moderately well, this is the soil information that we can find. Is that it can have it has 5 different layers with the A to the C horizon, with the suffix that goes with that horizon. It has an upper and lower depth, so we can understand how the soil is structured. And then what coarse fragments are found, the total sand, total silt, total clay. So this is where we can get our texture class. From there, how much organic matter, how much organic carbon is present within each of those soil horizons. What is the soil pH? And then this moisture field capacity and wilting point. So that shows how much available water is, how much water is available to the plant. And then one key property is the bulk density here. And you can see that 1.65, we don't actually reach the 1.65. So the bulk density should be fine. So then we take this information, the soil information, and then interpret it to the suitability criteria that we looked at, that table for potatoes. And then in the end, we get a suitability map for potatoes for our study area that shows good, fair, poor, and unsuitable. And you can see that there is some good areas, less than what you would expect to find, with a lot of poor and unsuitable. And when you dig into the soils maps and the topographic features or the landscape characteristics, you can see that the reason why these areas over here where there are fields have been downgraded by our suitability is because of the slope. So maybe we need to update our suitability table to say, you know what, we can actually grow in maybe areas that have up to a 10% slope or a 9% slope. Those are areas that we can kind of look back at and modify our suitability table. So yeah, so this is just an example of using soil properties and using soil maps to determine soil suitability for a given crop. And we can do that for a number of different crops as long as we have the suitability table for that crop. And now it's on to the Kahoot exercise. So I think Kaylee step in.
Hello, yes, just gonna pop it up.
Do I need to stop sharing? Yeah.
Yes, please. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Mhm. Yep.
Yes, okay. So for those of you who haven't played Kahoot before, you can join the game on your browser or on your mobile phone browser at www.kahoot.it. Or if you're using the Kahoot app, you can join the game there. Once you get there, this is the pin you'll enter, and we'll start once we see the players up on the screen. Oh no. It might progress automatically.
It's okay.
Okay. Now I'm seeing the countdown. This is the most computers I've seen ever in my life. I love it. This is so cool.
Kaylee or Becky, do you want to announce what's going to continue if students do have to leave at the bell?
Yes, so the game will continue onward and with the participants that are still able to play. The game is recorded, so if you want to come back and review the discussion alongside the questions, you can do that, or we will have the Kahoot available for you to play at your own pace or for the educators to play in their classroom in the file where we upload all the other workshop materials there. That's the word. Okay, Sheldon, take it away.
All right. So does the diagram describe soil series, catenas, or associations?
Oh, geez. Okay.
All
I'm
right, so
sorry,
we
I
did,
don't know
yeah.
how to override the pause.
Associations.
Would you like me to restart?
No, it's okay. It's good. It's good. It was associations. Exactly. Yeah. So which set of soils would you expect to have a coarser texture? The A or B? So single grain and granular, or the plate-like and massive? Which one would you expect to have a coarser texture? I'm trying to stop myself from giving away the answer. I want to keep talking, so. Yeah, so the answer is A, exactly. You have more open texture. So the single grain and the granular would be coarser. So which set of soils would you expect to have higher bulk density? So if we look at the same soils again, the single grain and granular and the plate-like and the massive, A and B, which one would have a higher bulk density? So think back to relating texture with bulk density. Yeah, exactly. B would be the answer.
Go away, Cohen.
Which soil would you expect to have a higher organic matter content? So if we look at, think back to soil color, which one would you expect to have a higher organic matter content? A or B? So A would be the one on the left side and right would be the one
Oh,
on
yes,
the,
it cut off. Yes, A is on the,
and B would be on the right side. Yeah,
yes.
there you go. Yeah, the answer is A, exactly. The dark color, the black color gives you the organic matter. That's the organic matter within the soil. What drainage class would you assign to the following soil? So there's a soil pit. Look at the colors. Is there presence or absence of water? So is it good drainage, bad drainage, well drained, or poorly drained? Well drained is the answer. Yeah. There's no such thing as good or bad drainage. there's no class for good or bad drainage. It's well drained. What drainage class would you assign to the following soil? So it's a little harder to see. Good drainage, bad drainage, well drained, or poorly drained. So is there presence, is there water present in the soil pit? And are the colors bright? Yeah, it's poorly drained, exactly. Yeah, so you can see the water in the soil pit, the bottom there. Sarah has a streak. Based on your understanding of soil horizons, is the following soil from a forest or an agricultural field? So think of the horizons that are present, what's present on the surface of the soil. It's an agricultural field, exactly. Yep. So there's no, it's a grassland or grass species that are out there. And the winner, Sarah. Good job, Sarah.
Congratulations, Sarah.
You get the rest of the day off. No, I'm just joking. Yeah, so that's my presentation. I'm not sure if there's time for questions or anything like that, but feel free to reach out if you would like.